This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate What If Kid Naruto was trained by Mito Uzumaki. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
He could think of 100 more exciting ways to launch his new career than sitting in the academy hallway, but that was just his blonde imagination. He was beginning to struggle to follow what they were discussing in class, and this was the third time this week. Death or dismemberment would undoubtedly be worse. Although he was genuinely only asking a question, Daikoku Sensei was still upset with him for disrupting class. When he was out here yesterday, they must have discussed this chakra stuff. Naruto noticed the doodles he had drawn on the wall yesterday when he glanced over his shoulder along the wall. That catchy stuff did sound kind of interesting, but it was so boring out here. He could listen in at the door, perhaps. Popping to his feet, Naruto tiptoed to the sliding door of the classroom. Though it was difficult to distinguish some of the unfamiliar words, he was certain that he heard something. Here is a chart showing an example of a chakra circulatory system. Neji.san, I believe your clan training covers this material extensively. Please come to the front of the class and identify the major components. Yes, Sensei. Naruto had yet to have the opportunity to form friendships with his peers. The majority of them simply pretended he didn't exist, while some were irritated that he had been admitted to the academy a year early. With the exception of times when Naruto caused trouble, Daikoku Sensei also did that most of the time. He listened as Neji described whatever he was pointing at using a string of cryptic terms. Perhaps it would make more sense if he could see it. Naruto gave himself a shrewd nod, then moved his hand to the door and lightly pressed it to the side. He could see his eerie peer pointing to a chart of a human body with squiggly lines through a crack in the door, which was old but slid smoothly enough. It still doesn't make sense, though. He only heard a few footsteps before the door flew open, causing Naruto to fall forward onto his face. Daikoku Sensei didn't really want an answer to some of the questions he asked, Naruto had discovered. What did I say about causing a disruption, Naruto? He asked. The door. Clack. Closed after the words, go home for the day and try again tomorrow. Naruto paused to stare. What went wrong for him this time? He stomped his feet and began to march towards the exit, huffing and putting his hands in his pockets. He had a really cool new apartment. Compared to his room at the orphanage, he had a lot more room there. Unquestionably better. On the downside, he had to look forward to seeing the caretakers at the orphanage if he returned home because they were better company than none at all. Rather, Naruto determined that his feet were in control. The village of Konohagakure was stunning. The populace was intelligent and amiable. When you were walking, it was still lovely to look at, not him, but each other. Naruto was well aware that people disliked him even at the age of 7. He received food, blankets, and other necessities from the people at the orphanage, but they never touched him and forbade him from touching them. That lesson came to him quickly. People would still look up from their work and move aside to give him space as he walked down the middle of the road, which was surrounded by two-story buildings. Others gave him a scowl as well. It was those looks that infuriated him. Once, a man even yelled at him for simply crossing the street, but before Naruto could figure out what was going on, he vanished into the crowd. He wasn't feeling any better because of this. He eventually found the village wall by following his feet. He was curious about what lay beyond. Although he had never entered, he had seen the woods from any of the gates. The thought thrilled him in part, but what if there were ghosts out there? His feet turned suddenly to circle the village's perimeter, and he shuddered uncontrollably. They were fortunate to have these walls. After a while, he couldn't tell how long, a drop of water splashed onto his cheek. He raised a hand to remove it, but as he did so, he noticed splashes on his fingers and then his arm. While he was getting lost, dark clouds had swooped in and threatened to ruin his day. From here, where in hell was his apartment? Naruto walked more quickly, searching for a well-known landmark. Perhaps he could see the Hokage monument if he climbed high enough, but from there, where was his apartment? He complained that the rain had gotten heavier and heavier until it felt like fat droplets were soaking through his white shirt. Shelter. Where could he wait out the rain? It appeared to be an old neighborhood, primarily modest homes. Two buildings, each with its own walls. He passed one of the walls and peered through a gap in the gate's big wooden doors to see a dilapidated temple. He was certain that no one would be there to chase him out because the entryway was only partially collapsed. Naruto slipped through the opening and padded across the broad, flat, stoned path. Streams of water running down his bangs into his eyes would have made the water droplets splashing on the paving stones look prettier. Hello. No response. Naruto tested the boards in front of him because he knew enough to exercise caution around old buildings like this, but it seemed to be still quite sturdy. A brazier on the wall came to life as Naruto slipped through the front doors, filling the room with firelight. Although the floor was dusty, it didn't appear as dilapidated as the exterior. Naruto tried to control his breathing and tightly gripped the fabric of his shirt over his heart, but he didn't notice. The entire situation seemed increasingly eerie. As time passed, wasn't this a temple that had been abandoned? Nothing else had happened since the brazier thing caught fire, but Naruto was seriously considering going outside into the rain once more. It might have been ninja magic. He had occasionally witnessed some bizarre things in Gigi's office in the village. Yes, that sounds nice. Ninja magic, that's all. Let's move on. Even though that was a good argument, Naruto would concede that the wall of incredible masks on the opposite side of the hall was more of the reason. They numbered in the dozens. Eager to get a better look, he hurried over. Every wooden mask has an amazing shape. Unlike the dull Anbu masks he had previously seen. With horns and fangs protruding from its forehead, this one had a menacing smile. When his fingers touched it, Naruto felt a surge of fear as he reached out to remove it from the wall. He took a few steps back as the ghost conclusion suddenly seemed more plausible. He was relieved that the front door was still hanging on its hinges as he glanced over his shoulder to check if anything had moved. A flash of red drew his attention back to the masks. Perhaps the more ominous looking mask should be left alone for the time being. Among the frightening ones, this one didn't seem to belong. Set aside as though it had nothing to do with the others. It wasn't that it looked friendly. Instead, it resembled a noblewoman with tomato-red hair and stubby horns. Despite the coldness of her expression, he found himself drawn to it. With trepidation, Naruto extended his hand once more to touch this mask. A sensation of warmth washed over him as his finger touched the wood. The fear had been overwhelming, but not this time. This felt like a nice mask, for lack of a better way to put it. Naruto carefully removed the mask from its peg and placed it over his own face almost instinctively. Everything turned white. Naruto blinked multiple times, anticipating that the intense burst of light would cause eye pain, but he felt fine. Nothing appeared to be much more disturbed than when he arrived, and he was still inside the temple. The brazier was still burning, the woman with the red hair was still there, the doors were still hanging limply on their remaining hinges. Eek! Naruto jumped away from the ghostly, transparent figure that was silently staring at him. It was made worse by the fact that she was in his way of the exit. A.Y.UA, ghost? Her paper tag earrings dangled as the woman in the soft white kimono tilted her head thoughtfully to the side before answering. She turned around and looked at the dilapidated old building. I suppose I am. It has clearly been some time since I was made. Naruto used that moment to move slightly to the side and head for the door, but he had only gone about a third of the way when she cleared her throat, and when he turned back to face her, she was staring at him once more. The tone was inquisitive, but it had a hint of apprehension that caused the hairs on the back of his neck to stand up. And who are you? Pause to catch your breath. Naruto Uzumaki. Hold off for a moment. Another inch to the door. If nothing else, the stare seemed to deepen. Uzumaki? Odd. From your mother or your father? He didn't think this conversation would go this way. More inches. I don't know. I never knew my parents. This could really work. He couldn't help but notice a pained expression on the woman's face as he kept his eyes fixed on it, hoping to hide the purpose of his shuffling feet. Without making a sound, she approached him and pressed her face against his, immobilizing him. She shook her head back and forth, examining his face from every side, then straightened up and nodded sharply. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki, my successor. Ghost or not, he had completely forgotten about running. What? How do you know? The woman turned and walked away a few steps away, as if she was lost in her own thoughts once more. You may not have the Uzumaki family hair, but I've observed that it doesn't carry over every time an Uzumaki bears children with a maid outside of the clan. My own granddaughter is such an example. Perhaps it's something about blonde fathers. Naruto's voice didn't feel as big as he would have liked, but that didn't stop him from getting answers this time. Who are you? Datbeo. The woman looked taken aback. She bowed her head courteously toward him, but he was too busy asking himself questions to notice. Oh my, I'm afraid it has been some time since I haven't been recognized by sight. My apologies. I am Mito Uzumaki, the First Lady of Konohagakure, Jinchuriki to the 9. Tailed Fox, and Seal Master of the Uzumaki clan. When she noticed this, she pointed to a low table at the far side of the room and moved to sit there. Slowly, Naruto followed, but as soon as he settled into the cushion, a cloud of dust burst, causing him to start coughing. The woman chuckled softly at the boy's pouty expression after it had passed. All right, Naruto Uzumaki. Ask your questions and I will try to answer them as best as I can. He bit and shifted as though the cushion wasn't comfortable, but he hardly noticed. Did you know my mom? Mito gave him a nod. Yes, Kushina Uzumaki was a splendid girl. Cheerful, excitable, a bit impulsive. She grinned down at the boy, who was beaming uncontrollably. Oh, and she had a tremendous temper. Also something that, I'm afraid, runs in the family. She was also shaping up to be a talented kunoichi, with an excellent grasp of our bloodline. Perhaps some of that rubbed off? She was disappointed in whatever response she had anticipated. What's a bloodline? Well, let's see. How much do you know about ninjutsu? Is that ninja magic? She held back from rubbing the bridge of her nose for a moment as she stared. In a sense, but we'll get into that in a moment. Are you attending the Shinobi Academy? His apprehensive laughter revealed little about her experience. Yep. I've been there for almost 2 months, I think. I was there this morning, but I'm taking the rest of the day off. Mito watched the boy crawl into himself for a moment before he smiled brightly and asked, So are you skipping class, or were you asked to leave? I'm just too awesome, said Daikoku. Sensei said I could go. The boy's rubbing of the back of his neck seemed like a fairly obvious tell, and his smile was just too big to be real. Is this the first time your sensei has allowed you to take the rest of the day off? No, a few times. I just don't need as much help as the other kids. As Mito slowly rose from the floor to her feet, Naruto immediately followed. Yes. That must be nice. I wonder if I might ask for a favor, Naruto-chan. Sure. What do you need? Mito returned the boy's smile. She pointed to the wooden mask he was still holding and said, I would like you to take my mask to the Hokage and tell him that I would like to speak to him. Can you do that? Sure thing, Yoma. Bachan. You can count on me, Datbeo. That made her smile, and she gave a soft nod. I believe the rain has stopped, so you should be on your way. Will you promise to visit again? Naruto waved joyfully and slipped between the hanging doors to the slippery paving stones outside, saying, Absolutely. See ya later. Perhaps ghosts weren't as terrifying as people thought. The third Hokage, Konohagakure's leader, and god of shinobi, Hiruzen Sarutobi, gazed blankly at a reminder of the one woman who could make him feel like a child even in his role as Hokage. He knew right away what it meant when Naruto dropped the wooden mask. Watching the sparks rise from the bowl, he tapped his pipe against the desk in front of him. When the boy discovered what must have been his inheritance, he wasn't angry with him. But why was she the one who had to do it? Tobirama Senju's rival in many respects was Mito Uzumaki. They were seal masters from rival schools. They had to share a brother's and husband's affections, and they disagreed on how to manage a secret village. There's nothing like the friendly rivalry between Guy and Kakashi. Since Hiruzen had been a student of the Tobirama, he had frequently been pulled into those altercations. Perhaps her heart wasn't in it, but the long-lived woman had found new grounds to protest after the death of his sensei and his own heir to the Hokage's hat. She had completely left public life after her home village was destroyed. Perhaps now would be a good time to say goodbye, he thought as he held the mask up in front of himself once more. There was a lasting regret that she had died so quietly, and her mark could be seen everywhere in the village. Her closest friends and family have long since passed away. His Anbu guards hurried out of the room to set up their stations at the entry points after he made a motion with his left hand. When he turned the mask around to face the back, he felt the telltale pulse of his chakra draining to power the mosque's jutsu as he lightly touched the wood to his face. She was there when he lowered it again. She was a little younger than he had remembered, but who was he to judge? It was her chakra imprint. Uzumaki-san. In response, she rolled her eyes. Please, Hiru-chan. I think we can dispense with the formalities. Disguised poorly behind tinkering with his pipe once more, Hiruzen moaned to himself. So what would you like to talk about? Mito silently walked around the side of the desk to gaze out the window while rolling her eyes. The village has gone through many changes in my absence. I will not demand that you bring me up to speed, as the village is no longer a responsibility we share. I hope that will help me find a few answers, however. Mito merely nodded when he asked, You want to know what happened to Kushina? Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and inhaled deeply. As you might expect, Kushina objected, but it was one of only a few things that he denied her. Kushina married Minato Namikaze in secret shortly after he was named the Yondaime Hokage. His role in the Third Shinobi War made him many powerful enemies, and he was reluctant to share them. Kushina objected, Mito said, a tiny smile appearing on his lips. In the end, it made no difference. Kushina was expecting a child. It's dangerous for a female Jinchuriki to give birth, as you are aware. Hiruzen paused uneasily. We're still not sure what happened during the birth, but the chakra network of mother and child separating can leave gaps through which the Biju can claw their way through. The Kyuubi was let loose to wreak havoc on the village after my wife, the Wako, was killed. There was an apparent third party, but the only people who might know who that was died that night. Minato and Kushina managed to seal the Kyuubi into their son. In the brief time I had to discuss options with them, I suggested other names, but there was no time to take risks with unproven bloodlines. Only Uzumaki have ever been known to successfully contain the beast, and there was one of an appropriate age to do so. Mito's forehead furrowed. How did the Namikaze brat seal the Kyuubi? Hiruzen responded with a bit of anxiety. Without Hashirama's wood release, he needed to weaken the beast. He used the Shiki Fuin to seal half of its chakra in the mask of the Shinigami and sealed the remaining unbalanced chakra into his son, Naruto. Mito agitatedly shook her head. So much like Tobirama, strong Hokage, bad father. She waved Hiruzen away just as it appeared he was going to answer that. I'm sorry, old habit. While I'm interested to know that my Shinigami mask was used by someone who I did not teach my sealing techniques, I will assume Kushina taught him, as was her right after my death. I asked Naruto-chan to bring me here today to see to the future. I understand he is not fitting in well at the academy? That is fair to say. I allowed him to start the chakra training part of the academy a year early in order to start him on the orphan shinobi fund so I could justify taking him out of the orphanage. He may. Mito cut him off, saying, why not support him on the savings of his parents, or my own? I can't imagine Minato would be so poor at managing money that he could be Hokage and near bankrupt at the same time. Naruto's heritage and his burden are each considered S-class secrets. Giving him access to the funds of either parent would leave a paper trail linking the boy either to a war hero with many enemies or the previous Jinchuriki. Neither secret seems especially safe. The boy is the spitting image of his father at the age I knew him, and you've given him his mother's clan name. I agree that the boy's unintentional insistence on looking like his father is becoming problematic, but the clan name has turned out to be less of an issue. While an important part of the village's legacy, those who didn't live through the Second Shinobi War do not remember the friendship we had with Uzushiogakure. To most, it is just a name. To those that remember, his hair lends credence to the suggestion that it was given to him to honor our fallen comrades. Some know the truth, but they are all tightly connected to the village. With a sigh, Mito paced, her footsteps still completely quiet. Very well, but that makes my request less risky than I had feared. I wish to train the boy in his birthright. In Uzumaki fuinjutsu. Hiruzen wasn't sure how he felt about the idea of the hyperactive boy learning such dangerous techniques without any real parental guidance to rein him in. Isn't 7 a bit early for such training? He's only just learning what chakra and ninjutsu are. In Uzushiogakure, we taught our children seals as soon as they finished learning their letters and numbers. Perhaps his education will proceed at a faster pace if he shows the talent, but if he really is the last Uzumaki, then I'm afraid that I must insist. She halted her pace and turned to face Hokage once more. Besides, though I may not be technically alive to invoke them, this village has strict rules about clan matters such as these, doesn't it? Hiruzen scowled but gave a firm nod. She nodded, and he pulled a parchment and brush from a drawer in his desk. It does. Though I will allow it on the condition that you restrict such training to Uzumaki clan property. In this case, the temple grounds. Considering your present limitations, what will you need to begin? When Naruto got home yesterday, he swore at himself for not being more attentive. He had been aimlessly searching for the temple he was now entering for the past hour. Hello? Yoma. Bachin? As before, as soon as he stepped through the doorway, the brazier began to light itself. So awesome. But the hall was deserted. The ghost lady was gone, but the demon masks remained. He wandered around for a while, prodding at the masks. Even though they still looked cool, most of them appeared to be regular wood, though some made him uneasy. He didn't go near the first one. The scariest, for sure. Was she forgetting? Was his tardiness the reason she left? She's a ghost, hold on. Where would she go? He wandered to the low table and sat on the cushion because he was getting bored. This time, the dust cloud wasn't an issue. The mask he had given to the Hokage was indeed on the table. Hey, the mask is back, said the man. Was it not wanted by the Hokage? The warmth returned when he picked it up. It was, in fact, the best mask available. He shrugged and covered his face with the mask once more, not seeing anyone over his shoulder. Another white flash, but not as strong as the last one. Mito was seated across from him at the table when he lowered the mask. Welcome back, Naruto. Chan. Her smile started out warm but soon turned serious and a little frightening. You're quite late. Naruto swallowed. He seemed a strange mix of excited and embarrassed to the woman. This place isn't that easy to find. And then I got here and you weren't here, so I just looked around. Besides, you're a ghost, aren't you? Why would you care? Well, She replied slightly sardonically, "You will need to learn how to be punctual if you want to be a ninja. Prepare ahead of time and take precautions. I'll expect you to be on time the next time." Next time? He saw the sparkle in her eye, despite the fact that she was partially translucent. Naruto gave a blank stare in response. "When we continue your lessons, I'm going to teach you your family's art of fuinjutsu, Naruto." Instantly, excitement boiled to the surface. "Yada! I'm gonna be the strongest ninja in the world, and then I'll be Hokage. Datbayo." The meticulous brushwork continued as Naruto copied each kanji and symbol from one scroll to the next, complaining, This is so boring. I thought we were going to learn some kick-ass ninja magic." "Well, if you keep working on your calligraphy drills, I will tell you something about what our family techniques can do. After all, our techniques were considered so dangerous, that both Kumo and Kirigakure allied for the sole purpose of destroying our small village. Is that what you want to learn?" Naruto gave a fierce nod. Mito concluded uniformly, "Then keep writing, and I'll tell you more about it." With haste, the boy bent over the parchment and began writing frantically. Incomprehensibly, but she would address that later. The Uzumaki clan, like many clans, had their secret techniques. Some for use in battle, others for espionage or sabotage. We were one of the fortunate clans to possess a bloodline ability as well, passed down through the generations. However, our chakra chains were not the reason we were feared. No, it was our sealing techniques that made us feared. Are you familiar with sealing, Naruto-kun? Naruto stumbled through a few hand seal imitations before returning to his work. Is that like the things you do with your hands?" he asked. "No, though there is a relationship between seals and hand seals. They are both methods of shaping chakra to do what we want. With the correct focus and hand seal configuration, a powerful ninja can blow a hole in a mountain. But written seals are more versatile. With written seals, you can make the mountain vanish as if it was never there." At that, Naruto's eyes grew wide. "So how does this help me learn how to make mountains disappear?" Mito desperately wanted to use his own seal as an example, but he knew it would be too distracting. "Later on, that will happen. In this form, I am unable to create actual seals of my own, but I'm sure you've seen them before, even if you didn't know what they were. Have you ever seen someone put something on a scroll and make it disappear? Or make something appear on a scroll by wiping a little blood on it?" The boy's brush hung in mid-thought, and he nodded. "I saw a ninja pull something out of a scroll in Gigi's office before." "Did you see what was written on the scroll?" Naruto furrowed his brow in an attempt to recall the specifics, saying, "It looked like a bunch of squiggles." Mito merely grinned. The blank expression on Naruto's face said it all. "I can imagine." However, those squiggles were very carefully drawn seals, allowing the user to push an object into a pocket of folded space, or remove that object from that space. In other words, you could hide a bowl of soup in a piece of paper, and remove it when you wanted to eat. The blonde was almost standing now and exclaimed, "Like ramen." Well, he was true to at least one aspect of the Uzumaki lineage. With vigorous nodding, he said, "Yes, like ramen. Would you like to learn how to do that? Then you'll first need to master this drill. Do you think you can do that?" "You can count on it, Datbayo, after 3 weeks. Daikoku." Sensei had a focused smile on his face, but Naruto could see his fingers lightly tapping the hardcover of a familiar orange book on his desk. "Okay class, I think that about wraps it up for Intro to Chakra. There's not much more we can do until you each can mold chakra yourselves, so we're all going to go outside in order to perform a special exercise. Follow Suzume Sensei out the back doors to the yard and she'll explain it to you." Naruto believed he had seen other people reading that book around town, but he wasn't positive. He recalled because he found it strange that an adult ninja would blush and giggle while strolling down the street while holding a book. So unhip. Yoma Sensei had him practice his observational skills now that he had completed his calligraphy exercises. According to her, if a seal master wants to be effective in combat, they must be able to spot a flaw in a seal in a matter of seconds. There were only so many exercises she could set up for him because of her intangibility, so she had him polish the temple's masks, track a mouse back to its den, and count the knots in the walls and floors. Except for the most terrifying one. Sincerely, he thought it was more about maintaining the temple's cleanliness than it was about training, and he anticipated that she would soon have him repairing the doors and patio. Naruto went out the door with his classmates, joining the group that was making their way to the tree line behind their female instructor. She was dressed more like a civilian than a chunin, and her curly, black hair was even more poofed out than his. Although he had never met her before, the girls in the class seemed to have taken several classes with her. However, they refused to disclose the subject matter to him. Suzume Sensei halted the upperclassmen's commotion in the throwing range and instructed the students to form a large circle around her. Cross-legged, Naruto landed on the ground, soon followed by Rock Lee, his new friend, who sat to his right. Hi, Naruto.kun. Thank you again for sparring with me yesterday. We must do it again. The village could be powered by the energy emanating from the slightly older boy. Naruto liked the boy despite his serious, if peculiar, demeanor, which was characterized by his round eyes and black eyebrows. Hey, Lee. Yeah, that sounds great, I don't think I'll be available after class today, though. Lee appeared devastated. In a hurry, Naruto added, but we can do it this weekend. The black-haired boy's face lit up as fast as it had. Yosh. I will meet you on the friendly field of battle this weekend then, Naruto.kun. Naruto returned the smile. Yoma. Sensei had him work out in a clearing outside the official training grounds this past Sunday. The bushy-browed classmate approached him as he was punching the air and asked if he could train with him. It swiftly turned into a friendly fistfight that lasted for at least 30 minutes because they each only knew the basic kata from the academy. Without a doubt, Naruto was eager for round 2. Suzume. Sensei reprimanded the quarreling pair at the opposite end of the circle, saying, Kawanishi.san. Shiranui.san, please be quiet. Naruto could personally attest that Zaji Kawanishi was a bully, but not in the same way as Neji Hyuga, who would taunt and agitate you. You might want to strike Zaji in the face for no apparent reason. Tenten Shiranui was Naruto's favorite target, but he simply tried to stay away. The girl was constantly talking about how she would become a great kunoichi in the future. She would demonstrate that girls could be ninjas just as well as boys. Zaji could make anything you said sound foolish, even if you were correct, but he couldn't argue with Yoma. Sensei is a teacher. Now, students, what is the difference between a soldier and a ninja? Ninjas are awesome. Datbeo, Suzume. Sensei patiently looked around the student body and asked, anyone else? From directly behind the teacher, Shiho Hisajima's quiet voice said, ninjas use chakra. The Chunin teacher grinned and spun around. The students excitedly whispered to one another before she hushed them once more. That's right, Hisajima-san. Ninjas use chakra to do things that other people can't. Today we're going to learn how to unlock your chakra so that you can become ninja. First, I want you all to get comfortable. We're going to be meditating for a while. Naruto was now giddy with anticipation. He had already learned a lot about chakra from Yoma Sensei, and he hoped that having chakra would allow him to begin practicing ninja techniques rather than writing. Now I want you to put your hands into the ram seal, as Daikoku Sensei showed you. Good. Now close your eyes and imagine your body is filled with fireflies. They're buzzing around inside you. I want you to push them into your hands without moving your body. If you don't get it right away, that's okay. Just keep trying to visualize it. It was easy enough to imagine fireflies inside of him. There was always a buzzing sensation beneath Naruto's skin. Constantly present, but not uncomfortable. But it was kind of fun to imagine that feeling as fireflies. Now it was more difficult to push them anywhere. Are fireflies able to resist? Naruto opened his eyes after a few minutes. He could see Suzume Sensei crouching beside Mikaro Akamichi with a hand hovering over his hands in the ram seal through a few openings in the circle. She nodded at the plump boy as he opened his eyes and motioned for him to go toward the academy building. Naruto looked over his shoulder and saw Janine Shimura sitting against a tree and Neji performing katas in the yard. Naruto closed his eyes tightly and worked even harder. He was going to prove his dominance to those fireflies. Well, did it matter that he was dizzy now? Hours seemed to have gone by, but the only noticeable change was that his face tingled much more than usual. The feel of his hands remained unyielding. There were a few more holes in the circle, but he couldn't identify who was absent. All right, students, open your eyes. Lee remained beside him, as stiff as a spring. He could hear Tenten gritting his teeth and realized Zaji was gone. Now, don't be discouraged that some of your peers succeeded before you. Many of them are from clans that have undergone similar training before they came to the academy. We will continue this exercise for the rest of the week if necessary. Just be prepared to try again tomorrow. Now, go ahead and make your way back to your homeroom so your sensei can teach you about what you can do once you've unlocked it. With the exception of Tenten's irate muttering and Lee's grim resolve, the majority of the students returned calmly. Naruto searched all over for a clock. Yoma Sensei is going to assist. Naruto grabbed the female mask off the table and tossed his jacket into the mask chamber's corner. He touched it to his face for a moment, then put it down and got ready to open his puppy dog eyes. Sitting calmly at the table, the red-haired apparition examined the boy and asked, "What has you so energized today, Naruto-chan?" Yoma Sensei, you'll help me, right? Mito wondered whether something serious had happened. Calm down, boy. What do you need help with? He asked. Unlocking my chakra. My class did a thing where we tried to unlock our chakra, but I couldn't get anywhere. A bunch of the others got it right away and I can't fall behind. Even though the boy was overreacting, the urgency on his face was heartbreaking. The stress of believing he was failing at something so significant, however, was beyond her comprehension. Not to worry. You've been making excellent progress with your calligraphy, so I think we can take a day off to address this. Now, what did your teacher tell you to do? Suzume. Sensei told us to imagine fireflies and make them go to our hands. Mito gave a nod. It sounded like a variation on a technique she had heard about previously. Alright, and what happened when you tried to do that? Uncharacteristically, Naruto bit his lip. Nothing. I guess I got a little lightheaded. My face got more tingly. The woman sighed and closed her eyes. Tiny. She had a sneaking suspicion that she knew. Naruto. Chan, do you often feel tingly? I guess. This was a lot more tingly than normal though. She glanced at her imprint mask on the table for a moment. Had the tenketsu been forced open in the boy's face by the mask? It could have happened, given the amount of chakra he held as a jinchuriki. Although it wouldn't be a safe place to gather chakra if you didn't have the right control, it would be a good place to start. Alright, Naruto. Chan, please take a seat. Have you learned the ram seal? Good. Make that hand seal now. Now you can go ahead and imagine those fireflies again, but this time I want you to push them to your face. It got tingly again. Good, but we don't want to leave them there. Now that you have them all gathered together, imagine capturing them in a net. Do you have them? Good. Now move the net to your belly. Don't worry if some of them escape. Where is the tingling sensation now? In my belly. It feels stronger too. That's fine. Now move that net full of fireflies to your shoulder. And now to your arms. Your forearms. And finally, your hands. How do your hands feel? Tingly. And warm. Naruto's hands appeared to be glowing blue to the unaided eye. It was very hard to make visible chakra, but nobody was likely to try that on purpose. The fact that the boy could already create a slight glow using recently unblocked tenketsu points demonstrated how much chakra he possessed. It seemed like too much. Naruto. Chan, you can stop. I believe we have successfully unlocked your chakra. You should be able to show your teacher tomorrow at school. In the meantime, practice sending the fireflies to every part of your body. Naruto exclaimed, thanks Yoma. Sensei. You're the best, and appeared prepared to return to meditation in order to further experiment with his chakra before Mito intervened. Before you get carried away, I would like to try something. Sure, anything you want, Yoma. Sensei. Mito grinned. Despite his hyperactive personality, the boy was proving to be a better student than one might anticipate. Please take off your shirt and lie on the ground, on your back. She was grateful that Naruto was too young to misunderstand this. Good, now make the ram seal again, and channel your chakra into your belly. We call that area your core. Excellent. That was very quick. Now hold it there as long as you can. Okay. Yes, sensei. Black marks seemed to rise to the surface of his skin as the chakra was directed to his core. 2 seals with 4 symbols that are not linked. It was similar to what she had used long ago to seal the Kyuubi into herself. On the other hand, there were numerous changes. Subtle details that are hard to notice if you're not familiar with the Uzumaki style. A ward that safeguards the throughput modification. She would need to inquire with Hiruzen about where the ward's key was kept. Interesting, huh? 2 imprints of stored chakra. An ingenious concept. To be honest, she wished she had considered it. They probably can only be accessed through a mindscape because they lack a projection element. His parents? The seal vanished suddenly. The boy was blushing and scratching the back of his neck when he said, the fireflies escaped. Quite alright, Naruto. Chan. You did well. Go ahead and put your shirt back on. We'll move on to something else. After putting the black shirt back over his head, he took a seat at the table once more. He cast an uneasy glance at the inkpot and brush. That definitely caught his attention. No, we're done practicing your calligraphy for now. I want your full attention for what we're going to discuss next. She constantly encouraged him to keep an eye on his surroundings while working. This was novel. In front of the mask wall, Mito paced slowly back and forth. We've talked a great deal about how basic sealing works. How chakra flow is regulated. With a look of guilt, she clarified, and no, I don't expect that you've picked it all up the first time. That was an overview so that we could dive into specifics later. But before we get to that, we have one last subject to discuss. Her question was, do you remember why the Uzumaki clan was feared? as she stopped in front of the table. Because of seals? Naruto started to say, that's right, but seals aren't exclusive to us. Other people can and do learn them. Why were we so special? But she stopped him with a hand gesture, indicating that the question was rhetorical. The Uzumaki clan did something with sealing that no one else had, or to my knowledge has, ever done. We made seals that can grow. At that, Naruto cocked his head. I didn't think that was very impressive. He was already aware of seals' ability to enlarge when necessary. Was there something he was missing? When a boy becomes a man, do you think it only because he grew taller? No. Life experience helps us become greater than we were when we started. No Kage was born with the strength and ability to lead a hidden village. That was the power of the Uzumaki forbidden fuinjutsu, the Tsukumagami. Seals that behaved like living things. Seals that could mature into something new. We made them like you would make a tool, but with careful supervision, the tool could become just as versatile as a living ninja, except that they lacked many of a normal human's vulnerabilities. They could also be made from nearly anything and, theoretically, they would live forever. Traditionally, in our clan, you would not be recognized as a seal master until you had created your own Tsukumagami. The quality of the seal you created was a source of pride and played a rather large role in a new seal master's position within the village. Impress and you might one day become clan leader. Disappoint and it would be difficult to live it down. She chose a different approach after realizing that he wasn't paying attention to everything. Perhaps some examples will help. When I first introduced myself, I told you I was an Uzumaki seal master. What did I need to do to claim that title? Make one of those special seal things. A Tsukumagami, yes, and I did. You've already seen it a number of times. Do you think you know what it might be? He stared at her blankly for a moment, then looked around the room. He came up with the scary mask idea quickly. Mito returned the smile. It would be impossible for her to think of the mask in those terms because she had worked with it for so long, but she could see how someone might. That's right. That is the mask of the Shinigami. My masterpiece. The ultimate storage seal, you could say. However, to make it work requires the user to sacrifice their life. I believe the Yondaime used that mask to defeat the Kyuubi. That fact gave Naruto a laser-like focus if his attention was faltering due to the intricacy she was showering him with. He gazed intently at the disputed mask. It was frightening, to be sure, but was it a weapon? A weapon capable of rescuing the village? There have been many others as well. Not all of them were made to deal with problems as big as a Biju. Some were quite simple, or at least they started that way. Atsuo Uzumaki created the Wanshu no Seijo, the Band of Normalcy. Any idea what it did? Naruto gave a headshake. To be honest, it sounded as though it accomplished absolutely nothing. The band used a genjutsu to make anything the wearer did seem normal. Not invisible, just normal. So he could walk into a bank and take all the ryo he wanted and no one would stop him. Why? Because it was normal, shocked Naruto. That's right. I won't go into detail, but I should say that things didn't go very well for Atsuo and the Wanshu no Seijo was eventually destroyed. If you could make a Tsukumagami, would you like to make something like that? Naruto gave that careful thought. It appeared to be very helpful, even though it sounded a lot like cheating. He thought of the tricks he could play with something like that. Actually, nothing you did would stand out. To anybody, too simple for you, too typical for others. What a way to spoil something positive. No, I want people to acknowledge me, not ignore me. Mito grinned widely. Then maybe you'd like to make a never-ending bowl of ramen? Naruto instantly leapt to his feet. Yada. Yep, that's the one, let's get started. She chuckled and motioned for him to sit down. Hold your horses, I'm afraid to tell you that someone already made one, or at least a bowl that could supply various foods in ready form once they had been introduced to the artifact. And no, I don't know where it is. The child immediately deflated again. There are many fascinating Tsukumagami in the clan's history. Some have become legends, others cautionary tales. Yoshi Uzumaki made a dancing sword that could fly at his whim and fight his enemies. Until the day he grew angry at his wife and it ran her through before he could stop it. Aiko Uzumaki made a cloak of fire that allowed her incredible control over fire ninjutsu. Her own and that of others, wresting control of the flames and redirecting attacks back at her opponents. The cloak grew to love the flames more than its master, however, and she was burned alive. Needless to say, both of those Tsukumagami were also destroyed. Naruto was unquestionably green by this point. He might need to reconsider the idea of making his own Tsukumagami. Are there any left? I mean, besides your mask. And hopefully the bowl. His cheerful disposition returned, and a boyish smile broke out. Yes. After the fall of our village, several of our relics reappeared in the hands of our attackers. Some believe that rather than fear driving them to destroy us, it was greed. They wanted our Tsukumagami. One of Kirigakure's 7 swordsmen, a Fubuki Suigazan, wields a massive chakra-absorbing sword called Samahata, or Sharkskin. I don't know if the man ever unlocked the sword's true potential. Yoshi Uzumaki was a brilliant man, and he was so proud of that sword. It has likely grown since then as well. Has anyone tried to take them back? Mito answered somewhat sharply, with what army? I'm sorry, Naruto. Chan. It's been discussed and dismissed before. No one cares about them as much as the Uzumaki do, and unfortunately we are not in great supply. I suspect there are other survivors out there, but they were understandably laid very low since the fall of the village. Mito was shocked by the fire in Naruto's eyes and said, I'll get them back, Yoma, sensei. That is an admirable goal, but please do not get yourself killed over it. The Tsukumagami were dear to our clan, but they are not more dear than family, and we are family. The announcement made Naruto positively glow, but the fire remained unquenchable. Enjoying the moment, Mito grinned down at him, but it wouldn't last. She inhaled deeply. She concluded that she would have to jump right in and say, there is one more thing we need to talk about today, Naruto. Chan. Such news could not be delivered in a proper manner. What do you know about the Kyuubi? An exhausted boy with blonde hair entered the empty apartment as the door cracked open. To boil some water, Naruto trudged to the kitchen. He was sure that today would be an exception to the rule that Yoma Sensei had made him eat a wider range of foods. He took a few carrots and green onions from the fridge, feeling a little bad about it. Now at least it all made sense. Kitsune no Kyuubi. Sealed within him. He always believed that people disliked him, but Yoma Sensei reassured him that it was because of what he stood for. They didn't even know him, after all. He thought he could understand their perspective. He had heard terrifying tales of the Kyuubis raging through the village. A monster for stories around the campfire. Sealed in his abdomen. On his new cutting board, he chopped the carrots absently. Since foreign merchants would treat him fairly, Yoma Sensei had given him the brilliant idea to purchase the majority of his belongings from them. He truly understood why now. The secret was unknown to them. It made him wonder how many people were aware of it. According to her, the Hokage classified it as a secret under threat of death. She remembered that she was already dead and laughed when Naruto asked if she would face consequences for telling him. Would Hokage Gigi, however, prevent him from seeing her going forward? Was he aware that she had told him? Naruto hurriedly added the fried noodles, chopped vegetables, and a pinch of salt to the waiting broth because the water was bubbling away. Ayame Nichan was an excellent educator. When Yoma Sensei instructed him to find a cook to teach him how to cook for himself, he wasn't sure what would happen. The process was soothing to him now that he understood some of the fundamentals. When he was preparing ramen, anyway. Without Yoma Sensei, Naruto would not know what to do. His journey to the masked temple was purely coincidental. Additionally, he now knew how to repay her for her assistance. The Tsukumagami are artifacts belonging to the Uzumaki clan. In order for their enemies to take them, his family was destroyed. Hell if he was going to give them to those jerks. However, she had no idea where they were. Well, aside from one, but he didn't believe he was ready to accept anything from a well-known swordsman. Still. The noodles appeared sufficiently tender. Using his chopsticks, he lifted a few strands and nibbled. Excellent. Grinning, he filled one of his new bowls with the noodles, vegetables, and broth. It was ready with a little fish sauce. He flipped one of his calligraphy practice scrolls over so he could write on the back after he sat down at the table. The location of the Shinigami's mask is known. Shark Tail, known location. Where is the never-ending ramen bowl? Did anyone else attend? Tomorrow, he would need to check with Yoma Sensei once more. Naruto glanced at the list below. Perhaps he could do this. If he didn't, nobody else would. He would regain them. With reverence, he raised his chopsticks above the aromatic bowl of ramen in front of him. Itadakimasu. Future weak. Slowly, Naruto turned his right wrist, bent his elbow, and stepped back with his left foot as he moved his hands away from his body. The teacher explained that these katas teach your body basic movements, and Yoma Sensei had insisted that he work on them, even though he wasn't sure how they would be used practically. He couldn't resist taking a quick look down the path beneath the trees behind him. He and his classmates had been struggling to unlock his chakra earlier that week, but now there was just one student left. He appeared to be able to see the perspiration dripping from Rock Lee's bushy brow from this distance. Lee was not present when Suzume Sensei sent Naruto and his new friend back to their home classroom, despite Naruto's intense desire to see if he could assist them. Naruto didn't see Lee again until lunchtime, when he was sitting on a bench against the academy building, looking dejected. "Hey Lee, how's it going?" The boy with the black hair turned to face the blonde. "Oh, hi Naruto-kun. I am looking forward to our spar this weekend." Lee's overly broad smile was somewhat subdued by the awkward silence as Naruto struggled to express what he wanted. "Lee, so did you have any luck with the chakra exercise?" Lee's smile grew even more strained and faded. "I tried to picture the fireflies in a net, as you advised, but ultimately I could not move them. They performed some tests at the hospital and say that I lack the ability to actively mold chakra. However, that will not stop me from being a great ninja." The announcement stunned Naruto. If you couldn't shape chakra, could you still be a ninja? Why not, then? Ninjaing was a profession. Perhaps different ninja performed those tasks in different ways. Well, Lee would be the one who could. He put a hand on Lee's shoulder and reaffirmed his resolve. "That's right, we'll both be great ninja." The encouragement brought the smile back with a vengeance. "Yosh!" Lee jumped up and down. The two boys clasped each other's wrists as he held out his hand and said, "We will become great ninjas of the village." Datbeo. The day of graduation. Crash. BZZTBZZTBZZTBZZT. The 10-year-old boy rolled out of bed with a whimper, thumping on the floor instead of attempting to push the blankets away. He rolled and levered himself to his knees and then to his feet after lying on the floor for a few more seconds. He braced himself on the bedpost and let out a throaty groan just for good measure. "Where am I? Which day is it? Yes, all right, so that one was simple, it's his apartment." But he stared at the calendar for a few moments before it all made sense. He sniffed at one of his armpits and glanced around the room. "Ah, right, okay, everything's fine, I just need to, he said. "Take a shower. Right. Let's start with that." Naruto took a new outfit out of the closet 5 minutes later. Tactical. Length trousers in burnt orange and a black tee. Shirt with a red Uzumaki swirl across the chest. He hurried into the kitchen, boiled a pot of water, and put on the second black sandal. Ramen in the morning seemed like a perfect excuse for breakfast before the graduation exam. No problem with Yoma sensei. He rummaged through the paper tags, inkwells, and scrolls that cluttered the dining room table, listening for the sound of bubbling. It didn't matter if they got messy because the majority of these were rejects. He kept his completed seals in the pockets inside his jacket or in his hip pouch. Speaking of which, Naruto grabbed the olive short-sleeved jacket from the coat rack and put it on, showcasing its recognizable orange trim. He swore and patted the empty breast pocket. What happened to it? The boy crawled on his hands and knees across the messy apartment floor until he came across a small bound book next to the couch. The official Uzumaki clan symbol, a swirl of red and black, was the only title on the brown hardcover. He randomly opened the book and quickly skimmed it. Tsukarutanki, the Skeleton Key, Entry 27, Creator, Uzumaki Yako. Appearance. A bronze key with 2 blades and a handle resembling a blade. A silver ball with a light blue Uzumaki swirl painted on 4 sides sits at the pommel. Its abilities include the ability to unlock or unravel anything it encounters. It's unclear if it can lock or put back together what it has unlocked. Danger. Unknown. Personal seal is thought to be at high risk. Where? Not sure. Notes. In the land of rivers, there are rumors of a legendary burglar. He has no village affiliation and is rumored to be able to breach any defenses without leaving any evidence of his presence. A new ninjutsu is assumed by common wisdom. Once more, Naruto closed the book. He took great pride in his Tsukumagami bingo book. He knew he probably spent too much time with this thing, even though he was diligent in his sealing lessons. He had become quite skilled at getting this type of information from others, but he lacked many hard facts. It took a moment for him to recognize the sound as the boiling of his water. 10 more minutes later, he was sprinting toward the academy down the street. He had eaten his breakfast before it had cooled, so his mouth was a little burnt, but that was normal. Getting his hite was all he could think about. "Watch out! I'm gonna be a great ninja, Datbeo." When the boy made his announcement, some onlookers stared at him in terror, but most thought he had just gone crazy. It wouldn't be the first time a ninja did that. Ignoring everything, Naruto kicked up dust as he traveled to meet fate. Hiruzen, the Sarutobi, was growing too old for this. He didn't really do anything, like calling for a messenger. At a glance, he recognized the culprit, and the boy was difficult enough to apprehend using the few administrative chunin typically assigned to the job. He considered Naruto's growth while standing at his office window with a view of the Hokage monument. An excellent clue was the enormous multicolored Uzumaki swirl that was painted over the Nidaime Hokage's face. Tobarama. Sensei didn't regret letting Naruto train with his deceased ancestor, even though he would have rolled in his grave to witness such a thing. He had seen more than enough during the few lunches they still had together at Ichiraku Ramen to demonstrate the boy's artistic talent. Something about the crisscrossing lines and antiquated symbols just worked for him, which is hard to believe given how hard it was to get him to focus. The boy's grandfather figure couldn't help but feel a little nervous because he would be taking his graduation exam today. Putting seals aside, he had been told on multiple occasions that the blonde was still causing trouble in class. Prejudice probably played a part in that, but he remained optimistic that Naruto would overcome the obstacles and succeed. He couldn't make Konoha a ninja like the boy, after all, and being partial would only make him less friendly with the people he was learning to work with. Hiruzen wandered back to his chair and turned back toward the desk. Perhaps he ought to think about finding a replacement once more. When he felt at ease once more, he made a hand signal, and one of his personal guards departed to have Naruto escorted back to the academy. "Hey, I can walk on my own." A pair of weary chunin carried a bundled blonde boy through the classroom door as it slid open with a clack. Without bothering to untie him, they threw him to the ground with a thud and left, complaining to themselves. After a minute of staring at the boy, Daikoku Sensei bent down to cut the ropes. The chunin who had brought the boy in had been a bit cruel with the bindings, but his students had been taught how to escape such circumstances. Despite his red face, Naruto got up quickly and walked calmly to his seat. "Anyway, as I was saying, you will be graded on your cumulative performance today. We'll start with a written section that will test you on some of your basic education. History, mathematics, conceptual understanding. Following that, you'll proceed to the yard where you'll take turns testing your physical abilities on the obstacle course, your taijutsu in a spar with an instructor, and your long-range accuracy and speed. Finally, after lunch we'll be testing your ninjutsu. As everyone showed they could perform a successful transformation earlier this year, we'll be testing on the clone jutsu. Any questions?" When no one stepped forward, Daikoku nodded and began passing stacks of tests to the front desks in the room to pass back. That was a lot to take in one breath, but he wanted to get started so they wouldn't end up running into lunch. Naruto's mental state reached 37. According to Yoma Sensei, mentally counting can help you avoid making regrettable decisions when you're feeling angry. Was it really necessary for those guys to restrain him and abandon him in such a manner in front of his entire class? He observed his classmates' expressions. Zaji's large condescending smile, Neji's sneer, and Shiho covering her face with her hands to avoid having to look. Lee was still with him, at least. Outcasts banded together. After stapling a test booklet onto his desk, his other desk neighbor resumed his work. Question 1. A comrade is knocked out at the end of a battle that involves the use of poison. Which 3 symptoms of poison exposure are the most typical to watch out for? Okay, correct. What's the next one, I wonder? Question 2. What does it mean to say, to a surrounded enemy, you must leave a way of escape? He found a cipher and skipped to the third question. Sweat was dripping down Naruto's forehead. Perhaps instead of working on his seals, he ought to have read the textbook more. Keeping his eyes off the water below, Naruto plodded across the log. He was slowing down a lot because his pants were already wet from trying to hurry the rope swing. He watched silently as Suzume Sensei crossed the finish line, wrote down his time, and headed to the sparring area. As they approached the throwing range, the first group was just finishing up. After wiping his knees, Daikoku Sensei greeted the students in front of him. He looked down at Naruto's dripping legs and said, "All right, I understand you just finished the obstacle course." The blonde was accustomed to being the one who people remembered falling, even though he wasn't the only one who had fallen. "Next up, you'll be given 4 minutes to impress me in a spar. The first 2 minutes on offense, the last on defense. Understood?" In response, students nodded their heads and whispered, "All right, then. Let's begin with Neji-san." The instructor's tone was composed, but Naruto sensed a tinge of excitement. It did not surprise him. He had previously engaged in taijutsu sparring with Neji. Perhaps the word, spar, is too strong. In taijutsu class, Neji destroyed him. The overly solemn boy entered the ring and took a strange position. "Well, if it's okay with you, Neji-san, let's stick with the academy taijutsu. I don't think I would last long against the gentle fist," Daikoku Sensei said, scratching the back of his neck. Neji changed his posture to one they were much more accustomed to and nodded courteously. According to the instructors, the academy teaches a style known as the dancing leaf. According to them, it was best for kids to learn, but Naruto didn't see the use in learning something that wouldn't be useful as an adult. Hajime Neji bounded forward toward the teacher at the command, launching a barrage of blows that the onlookers were finding difficult to follow. Daikoku. Sensei grimaced as some of them passed through despite his best efforts to block them. He could sense that the boy was repeatedly hitting the same spots, but each partially blocked blow lacked the force necessary to concern an adult like himself. If he wanted to be willing to test the other children, he had to stop this. That's enough, now defense. Without losing the ground he had gained, Neji moved fluidly into a defensive stance. When Daikoku Sensei attempted to circle the boy to get closer to the middle of the ring, the quick-footed Hyuga would shoo him away and get past his defense. When the timer dinged, his expression was one of relief. Good. Really excellent work, Neji-san. Alright, next, he said, glancing at the 8 pupils. Naruto. Get up here. After Neji, no one was eager to fight right away, but Naruto wasn't easily intimidated. He jumped into the ring and took his position. The scoff he heard coming from Neji's direction was ignored. First, offense. Hajime. Naruto rushed forward, attempting to hit the instructor's chest with a haymaker, but he was thrown to the ground when a hand grabbed his wrist. The outcome of another rush was the same. Naruto stumbled back to his feet, slowed down, and attempted to jab with his left to get his right past the teacher's defense. Naruto swung his left elbow at the instructor's grasping hand and made contact with the man's wrist after Daikoku. Sensei missed the jab and grabbed his right hand instead. Although it wasn't technically a dancing leaf move, Naruto didn't believe he was quick enough to reach the man's center. As he rubbed his injured wrist, Naruto watched his teacher's face darken, and the sound of bones on bones was both gratifying and frightening. Daikoku. Sensei approached Naruto without bothering to switch words, then grabbed the boy by the sleeve. The boy's arm was painfully bent behind his back and his face was covered in dirt after a sudden yank. Naruto was able to wriggle free and stand up again because the teacher wasn't bearing his weight on him. But not quickly enough, because a meaty hand shot forward and struck Naruto squarely in the nose, knocking him off balance and dazing him as he fell out of the ring. Daikoku. Sensei turned away and motioned for the following pupil to come into the ring. In the meantime, Naruto was just becoming aware that he had been knocked unconscious close to the Hyuga genius, who was now frowning at him. Neji turned back to the ring and disregarded Naruto's presence, saying, "Stay down if you know what's good for you, failure." Naruto got back up and patted his bloody nose with his sleeve. "Oi, I'll never stay down, Datbeo." Neji answered without turning, "Then you will die." Naruto's spine tingled at the cool tone of his classmate's voice, but he was unable to respond before a new drop of blood escaped from his nose. He decided that he couldn't win this argument with his nose pointing a few degrees off center, so he just complained and turned to leave. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Naruto gazed at his plate of food. In an Ichiraku takeout box, leftover ramen and veggies are packaged. It was a good life. The only thing he regretted was that it wasn't hot enough to have the wonderful ramen aroma, but by this point his nose had mostly healed. The physical exams could have gone better, but the written exam hadn't been as bad as he'd feared. He had a terrible time trying to finish the throwing test, and his eyes were watering from Daikoku Sensei's punch. In addition to his subpar performance in the spar, he needed to improve in the ninjutsu test. Luckily, he had the exact item. There was a loud thump on the bench seat beside him as he was thinking about his grand scheme. "Hello, Naruto-kun. Are you as energized by the tests as I am? They have been most difficult, but I am certain we will both shortly be genin of Konohagakure." Naruto gave his friend a smile. "Datbeo, just one more test and we're done." For a second, Lee's smile wavered. Lee's weakness was undoubtedly ninjutsu. Now that he had won the majority of their spars, he had no problems with the physical side of things, but unlike everyone else in the program, he had never been able to command his chakra. "Are you certain that we can pass the test this way? Neither of us can make a clone the way they taught us." Naruto's radiant smile was nothing short of confident. "By the end of today, we'll be ninja, and ninja are supposed to win however they can, right? So what if we had to improvise? If everything goes right, they won't even know. Just be sure to sell it, okay?" As he jumped up, Lee exclaimed, "Yosh! We will be true ninja." The two boys realized lunch was almost over when they saw other students making their way back to the classroom. They nodded one last time conspiratorially and fell into line. Next up, Rock Lee. Daikoku. Sensei gave the young man with the black hair a worried look as he rose from his desk and walked slowly to the front of the room. Although the specifics were technically medically confidential, Lee's chakra issues were well known. Despite his admirable efforts, most people thought the boy wouldn't make the final cut. What would a ninja be without chakra, after all? Please perform the clone jutsu. Remember, a full pass requires 3 fully functional clones, but you only need a partial pass to get your headband today. Do your best. Lee whispered, Yash, as he edged toward the trash can beside the desk. He made each hand seal with care. Ram, snake, tiger, clone jutsu. Beside him, a puff of smoke burst, and a moment later, he saw a perfect replica of himself standing there. Yash! They both exclaimed, grinning widely at the instructor. Daikoku was momentarily taken aback. Had the boy been able to technique at all? Even though there was only one clone, it was still a big improvement over the practicals in the classroom. But something wasn't right. Not only the unexpected turn of events. Another thing. After a quick glance around the classroom, everything seemed to fit. On Naruto's chair, a wastebasket was placed. He chose to walk over and give the clone a rap on the head with his knuckles instead of giving him a severe reprimand because he felt a little bad about losing control earlier. A blond boy appeared on the floor in a heap after a second burst of smoke and a muffled thump. Reminding himself that this was the last day he would have to deal with the brat, Daikoku. Sensei squeezed the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry, Lee, but if you cannot produce a viable clone, I'm going to have to recommend further training. Turning to the other child. As for you, you don't have his excuse. Make 3 clones. Naruto swallowed. He believed that he would have time to arrange his own test. How his workaround for Lee's test failed remained a mystery to him. He gave his friend a quick look. Failed. Nevertheless, the intense boy's only concern was supporting his friend. He was fortunate to have a friend like that. He created the ram seal by taking 3 slips of paper out of his pocket and throwing them in front of him. Fuin. After 3 puffs of smoke, 4 Narutos appeared out of nowhere. Daikoku was startled for the second time in less than a minute. If he wanted to, he could still fail the boy. It was a liability to rely on pre-made seals for such a basic technique, and it wouldn't be good to create a negative precedent. But, in a way, they were clones. The clone did not instantly vanish when he waved a hand through one, passing through it without encountering any resistance. Was that a benefit to tag-based clones? Who was he to make fun of? All year long, he had been eager to get rid of the boy. After grabbing a headband, he threw it to the boy and said, "Good enough. You pass. Come back on Monday for team assignments. And Lee? Sometime in the next few days, you'll want to report to the administration office to sort out what kind of remedial training you'll receive." Dismissed. His best friend's empty hands swiftly tempered the pure delight of holding his own headband, which was engraved with the village's leaf symbol on a steel plate. Silently, the two strolled along the road. You know, just 'cause you didn't pass this time, doesn't mean you can't take the test again. As they walked aimlessly, Lee gazed up at the sky. Thank you, Naruto-kun, but you know I can't use chakra. I'm afraid no amount of effort will overcome such an obstacle. He suddenly raised his eyebrows. But I am very proud of you, my friend. We both have suffered through difficulties, and you have emerged victorious. Congratulations, Naruto-kun. The idea of abandoning Lee crushed Naruto's heart. The two boys leapt away from the roaring figure that had appeared behind them, exclaiming, Yash! The fire of youth is alive in the next generation. Though I must correct you. Effort can overcome any obstacle, if you believe in yourself. In an attempt to stop his heart from beating out of his chest, Naruto's hand gripped his heart tightly. Who would do that to someone? But the words never left his lips because the man's appearance was even more shocking than his ability to sneak up behind someone and frighten the living daylights out of them. He was a huge man wearing bright orange leg warmers and a standard issue combat vest in a tight green workout suit. His eyebrows are even larger than Lee's, which is amazing. Now, congratulations on your graduation, Uzumaki-san. I'm sure you'll make the village proud. And you are correct. Lee-san may retake the exam once every 6 months if he pleases, but that is unnecessary. For I, Might Guy, Konoha's sublime green beast of prey, have come to offer an alternative. The man caught both boys' attention. Naruto questioned whether he was aware of how unsettling he appeared. But Lee was paying more attention to what the man had said. An alternative. That's right, he exclaimed, giving a big, corny smile and a thumbs up. Even though the sun was behind him, his teeth were so white that they appeared to sparkle. Not all ninja are the same. I have read your class records. They say that you are a failure, while another in your class is labeled a genius. But I am here to determine if you have the perseverance to be a genius of hard work. Do you accept my challenge? When Lee's eyes took on that expression, Naruto realized that asking more questions would be pointless, similar to tiny fireballs. Yash! I will be a genius of hard work. I accept your challenge, Guy. Sensei. After saying, your flames of youth are strong indeed, the man appeared to be on the verge of tears. What was going on? The man then vanished in a flash of movement. Tomorrow morning, Meet me at training ground 4 and we will run laps around the village until the sun goes down. And do not worry, I will bring rations that we may eat while we run. Naruto attempted to wipe away his stunned expression because he had heard that if you make a funny face for too long, it might stick that way. But at one point, his best friend was full of vitality. Naruto-kun. Perhaps we will yet be teammates. He shifted his weight back and forth, clearly restless. Naruto, now completely recovered from that experience, gave a firm nod. He shook hands firmly with Lee and said, "Good luck with your challenge, Lee. I just know you'll win." Before they left, Naruto to deliver the good news, and Lee to release his anxious energy. He marveled at the completely restored porch as he entered the shrine grounds. That structure was the result of much blood and sweat, and he was quite proud of it. Something about creating something with your own hands was extra special. He smiled at the brazier's sudden flames as he carefully pushed open the swinging doors. He put Yoma Sensei's mask back on the wall by their table and touched it to his face on automatic. So, Mito Uzumaki was an elegant woman of many years, but her one word carried a good deal of excitement. Pulling the headband from his hip pocket, Naruto hung it in front of his enormous smile. "Congratulations, Naruto-kun. Your hard work has paid off. Now all that's left is to be assigned a team for the Junin assessment, and you will be an official member of the Konoha ninja forces." Naruto blinked. Junin assessment? Well, this Junin guy in bright green and orange said he was gonna give Lee a special test, since he failed the academy one, but it sounded like that was a special case. If I'm understanding correctly, then you're quite right. It sounds like your Lee friend has been apprenticed. Or something like it. Good for him. Effort should be rewarded whenever possible. But no, you will still have to go through your own Junin assessment. Every new genin does. It helps your new sensei determine if the ground of genin they've been assigned will be able to work together in the field. Here she stopped. Though, perhaps I shouldn't say more. Junin can be quite secretive about their testing methods. My advice is to show them that you are a Konoha ninja, no matter what. Naruto gave a sharp nod. No matter what. She raised the corner of her mouth slightly and said, "Oh, and before I forget, how did your mission go?" Mito enjoyed having the last laugh over Tobirama, though this may have been petty. The fact that she was able to arrange this after they had both passed away just sealed the deal. It was life's small pleasures, as well as death. The Monday after this one. A purple-haired girl in black said, "Janine Shimura will be on Team 3, and she nodded to Daikoku. Sensei. 4 years later, Naruto still didn't truly know her. He assumed she was simply one of those individuals who shunned him. He knew Zaji, but who was Seimin Kasaragi? Zaji Kawanishi, and Seimin Kasaragi. Naruto eyed the larger boy, whom he couldn't recall ever seeing before, as two boys got up. I thought that was strange. Team 3 will be led by Junin, Hamaki Himura. Team 4 will consist of Mikaro Akamichi, Shiho Kawanishi, and Rock Lee, Daikoku. Sensei read further from the sheet. Damn. Lee and Naruto exchanged a distasteful glance. Team 4 will be led by Junin, Might Guy. Wasn't that the green guy from the other day? Naruto whispered, leaning over. Yosh, guy. Sensei is going to teach me to be a great ninja without ninjutsu or genjutsu. Lee replied in what could only be described as a whisper. Tenten hissed from the front row, "Shish. Some of us want to hear what team they're on." Daikoku's throat cleared. The words, Team 5 will consist of Naruto Uzumaki, made Naruto tense. For the foreseeable future, the next two names would be his comrades in arms. According to Yoma Sensei, many people viewed their genin teammates as family. He looked around the room to see who might be in that group. Tenten Shiranui, and Neji Hyuga. Surely this was a prank. That's crazy. Why'd I have to be his teammate? He's a jerk. Shut up, Naruto. If anyone, it's you that we shouldn't want to be teamed up with. Tenten continued to hiss. It wasn't meant to be this way. When Naruto looked at Neji across the room, he received a sneer in return. Naruto was not listening to Daikoku Sensei as he blithely went on naming teams. He had a lot of experience with it, though he refused to acknowledge it. Hyuga Neji. How could his new family ever include someone like that? He was a bully and a jerk. Self-centered, cruel. Tenten isn't that horrible. He appreciated her abilities, but he was a little serious. However, she didn't seem to like him. This was not going well. Hold on. Was the identity of Daikoku Sensei's new sensei disclosed? He missed that part, damn it. Psst, hey Tenten. What was our sensei's name again? Naruto, you idiot. Pay attention yourself. The brunette rolled her eyes and retorted in a whisper. Yoma Sensei would have required him to perform writing exercises for that. He knew she wouldn't continue, so he gave her his best pout when she didn't. She had already turned back around, so it was only slightly less effective than usual. Oh no. Alright, everyone is dismissed for the morning. Get to know your new teams and come back to this room right after lunch. Slipping into his seat at Ichiraku Ramen, Naruto moaned to himself. Ayame walked over to the other side of the bar and turned to face her favorite patron. Hey there, Naruto-kun. Why aren't you at the academy? Isn't it in session this time of day? She asked. Ayame. Ni-chan, I told you I graduated last week. I'm a ninja now. Naruto pouted up at her from his stool and gestured proudly at his headband. Oh, my little Naruto-kun is really growing up. Already a ninja. Will you be out saving princesses next? Do we get to do that? Yoma. Sensei said a lot of my missions will end up being pretty boring. Well, someone has to rescue them. You're not gonna let them suffer in their tall towers, right? That seems awfully cruel of you, Naruto-kun. Of course not. Tuchi Ichiraku approached his daughter from behind and ruffled her hair through the white handkerchief, preventing her brown hair from getting in the way of the food preparation. Now, don't go messing with his head, Ayame. Chan. So how about it, Naruto-kun? The usual. Yep. Extra large bowl of miso ramen, but I'll take it too. Go this time. After a few minutes, Naruto was in the Uzumaki shrine, sitting at his desk and applying a well-known mask to his face. Tenten and Neji, he complainingly said. Mito comforted the ranting boy, saying, Neji Hyuga, you told me he was very talented. It's not a bad thing to have someone strong watching your back. If Naruto hadn't been so stuffed with his takeout ramen, he would have argued that point. Hotter was preferable. He chewed grumpily, though. And Tenten Shiranui? I don't remember you talking much about her, though I'm familiar with some Shiranui from my day. What's your impression of the girl? Well, she scored the highest of the kunoichi this year. Perfect score on throwing. And, I know I just said ability is important in a comrade, but do you think you can get along with her? Teamwork is, in many ways, more important than ability after all. Naruto writhed slightly. She doesn't really like me, she thinks I'm stupid. For several moments, Mito gazed at the boy. She reaches to rub his shoulders and stops. Well, I think even you will admit that you have your moments, Naruto said grudgingly, nodding. But you're not stupid. She'll learn that from running missions with you. Don't worry so much. Even after all these years, some of those physical gestures were still automatic. Besides, children don't stay children. I think you'll find that a couple years of fieldwork and you'll hardly recognize most of your classmates. Hopefully for the better. Now, who is your new sensei? Naruto went pale. Looking at the classroom full of 11 and 12-year-olds with approval, Daikoku. Sensei said, it looks like everyone is back on time. Good. Being punctual is very important as a ninja. He had done his best to prepare them, but sending them out to kill or be killed was a horrible thing. Your new senseis will be arriving shortly to arrange your training regime and mission schedule. Good Lu. Dynamic entry. A green blur flew into the classroom, and a window that overlooked the yard exploded in a shower of glass. Those who hadn't spoken to him found the familiar, huge man standing tall at the front of the room to be very intimidating. Guy. Sensei. Lee exclaimed as he hurried from his desk to the front of the room. Mikaro and Shiho, his new teammates, exchanged a look of mild panic. Team 4, report to Training Ground 16. He left as quickly as he had arrived. Despite being on the second floor, Lee leapt after him through the window, but Naruto wasn't concerned. No, despite his concern for his friend's welfare, Mito had frightened him by telling him about some of the Junin who had previously led teams and how careless it was to disregard information about them. A number of Junin came to the classroom over the course of the next few minutes, most of them by the door, each time expressing the hope that Team 5 would be called. Even Daikoku. Sensei had left by the half hour. He, Neji, and Tenten were the only ones left. Naruto fished, so, what's the name of the guy we're waiting for? Tenten replied with a revealing smirk, or girl. If you don't even remember who was assigned as our team leader, then why do you think the Junin is a man? The statement, because, was actually quite valid. I guess I don't. Is our new sensei a woman? No, you idiot. Neji said. Tenten sulked a little and took out a kunai to play around with. Naruto observed her placing her hand on the desk and tapping the kunai's tip forward and backward between each pair of fingers. It seemed strange at first, but as she accelerated, he began to be truly impressed. It looked like Neji was meditating. That or acting like his new teammates were nothing more than noisy stones in his garden. After another 30 minutes, Naruto was lying on the ground and gazing up at the ceiling. He had considered using his ceiling notes to finish some work, but Sensei advised against doing so outside of the shrine or at home. Tenten had progressed to using her fingertip to balance the kunai. Not even practice kunai were those. From here he could see the sharp edge. He would have questioned how she did it if she hadn't just 10 minutes ago threatened to castrate him if he didn't stop bothering her. To be honest, he had no idea how Neji managed to remain calm while sitting there. A man's head emerged through the gaping door. Naruto struggled to determine whether he even knew the man because the majority of his face was hidden by a mask and headband. The stark white hair sticking up wildly was the only obvious feature. For a few heartbeats, the three new genin gazed at the man. How do I put this? My first impression is, you're a bunch of idiots. As though he was here only because he had nowhere else to go, Kakashi leaned against the roof railing of the academy and said, "Well, let's begin with introducing ourselves." With a bitter tone, Neji said, "Haven't you already read our files? I'm sure you know more about us than we would tell you." It seems that the extended wait for their sensei had a greater impact than he had permitted to be shown. Kakashi let out a yawn. "Humor me. You know, likes, dislikes, dreams for the future. Those kinds of things. Why don't you start us off, Silky Hair.kun?" The Hyuga genius stood at attention, rolling his eyes. "I am Neji Hyuga. What I like and dislike are irrelevant. Dreams are for those who do not understand the role that fate has for them." The helpful addition of douche, came from Naruto. "Right. Okay, Panda-chan. You go next." Tenten's glare wasn't enough to set people on fire, but she tried. Naruto laughed and Tenten smirked. "All right, so my name is Tenten Shiranui. I enjoy training and gadgets. I don't like people who don't take being a ninja seriously. You know, the kind of people that show up late to everything. My dream for the future is to become a great kunoichi, like Tsunade Senju, the slug Sanin." For an instant, Kakashi gazed at her. "I hope it's not too similar to Tsunade. Collectors of debt were serious business. And finally, Blondie. Tell us something about yourself." Naruto suddenly stood up. Naruto pouted and kicked at the roof's tiles, saying, "Yosh, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I like Ichiraku ramen and the sealing arts. I dislike when I make a mistake in the last seal element and have to scrap the whole thing." Ignoring one of his new teammates' dangerously narrowed eyes, he said, "And my dream is to find my family's legacies and return them to where they belong. Datbeo," before he punched his fist into the air. But Kakashi was not. This might necessitate a minor adjustment to the original plans, so that's it for introductions. The visual exclamation point was Naruto's accusing finger, which said, "Hey, you didn't introduce yourself." Okay. My name is Kakashi Hitaki. I don't want to share my preferences with you. Future goals? Kakashi gazed off into space for a moment. "Moving on. Tomorrow morning, the three of you will begin your shinobi duties." With considerable eagerness, Tenten inquired, "What kind of duties?" "First, the four of us are going to do some survival training." Tenten's forehead furrowed. "Wait, not a mission? Didn't we just get done with training?" "This isn't normal training. This time, I'm your opponent." "You mean like a spar, right? So you know how to best train us? After all, you're a Junin, and we only just became Genin." "Not exactly. If you don't beat me, then I'm afraid you're going to have to go back to the academy, after all." Naruto was brimming with rage. "What, we just passed the graduation exam. We graduated. How can you make us go back?" he exclaimed. Kakashi responded by tilting his head to the side. The masked man said, "The exam was just to determine who had the chance to become Genin. Of the 24 graduates this year, only 9 will become full Genin. Whether or not you will be one of them is up to you. Tomorrow morning, be at the bridge by training ground 3 at 6 o'clock. And don't bother eating beforehand. You'll just throw it back up." He then disappeared in a whirlwind of wind that stirred up the fallen leaves on the tiles surrounding them when the masked man smiled too broadly. Neither of Naruto's new teammates had a response, suggesting that they both shared his concern. "Bastard. He doesn't even sound like he wants to be a teacher. Do you think he'd fail us on purpose?" Without saying anything, Neji simply got up and left. She dragged out the final syllable as a horrible thought occurred to her. Tenten shrugged and said, "I don't know. I can probably ask my uncle about him. I mean, neither of us would draw much attention if we failed, but I can't see Neji being failed. People are already talking about how one day he'll be in Anbu. Do you think he might fail some of us, but not all of us?" Naruto growled in the back of his throat. "They said we were teammates. How can they make us teammates and then turn around and split us up?" And if they do something that's slimy? His vivid blue eyes glinted mischievously as he thought about the paint supplies concealed at the temple. Well, I don't care. We'll pass whatever test he throws at us tomorrow with flying colors. As he turned and walked away, a low cackle worked its way out of the back of his throat, maybe even literally. Tenten let out a sigh and wondered what she had done to deserve this. Below the footbridge, Naruto kicked another rock into the stream. At the academy, wasn't being on time one of the topics they discussed? He was certain that he recalled receiving that lecture from both Yoma sensei and his teachers. That day was apparently missed by his new sensei. Tenten let out a loud sigh, but her expression was one of disappointment. On that point, at least, they agreed. Neji appeared to be completely unaware of the outside world as he sat cross-legged on a rock near the path's edge. The only signs he wasn't asleep were the veins on the sides of his face. Even though Yoma sensei told him a lot about it, he was still quite uncomfortable with it. He appeared to be just a few seconds away from exploding. As the mental image came to its logical conclusion, the almost giggle swiftly turned into a grimace. What was the duration of their wait? Blaming it for not carrying the watch he broke during training months ago, the blonde took a quick look at the hairs on his bare wrist. Unfortunately, he didn't realize how much more than fixing the porch such a task would be until he opened it up, even though it was damn handy. Tenten was the first to break the silence. Do you think that maybe Kakashi sensei meant a different bridge? Naruto pointed to the 3 thick wooden posts protruding from the ground and said, maybe? I was sure he said training ground 3. That's it over there, right? Tenten leaned back against the railing and gave a response that was somewhere between a nod and a shrug. Neji, can you see any other bridges from here? Maybe there's one in the grounds we don't know about. It appeared for a brief moment that the boy with the perfect hair had not heard them. He was suddenly dead to the world once more. There are no bridges in the grounds. The next 2 footbridges along this stream are equally vacant. Oh, well thanks for checking. Strange. After many minutes, Neji moved once more while Naruto was halfway through checking his knapsack. A puff of smoke erupted from the earth as he turned his head, leaving Kakashi sensei standing idly, as though he had been waiting for them. Hey kids, good morning. Naruto jumped up and down and pointed with his finger as if he wished it were sharper, saying, you're late. Introspectively, Kakashi tapped his chin. He pulls a clock from one of his pouches and places it atop a tree stump, saying, perhaps. With a pair of silver sleigh bells hanging tauntingly in front of them, he said, okay, this clock is set for noon. Naruto could already feel his stomach churn in protest as he said, here are 2 bells. Your task is to take these from me before the time's up. Those who don't have a bell by noon, get no lunch. I'll not only tie you to one of those stumps, but I'll also eat right in front of you. Naruto was now unable to speak. What made their sensei so unkind? Though it's possible that Neji was simply constipated, a quick glance revealed that his fellow torturers felt the same way. You only have to get 1 bell. There are only 2, so one of you will definitely be tied to the stump. Also, the person who doesn't take a bell fails, so at least one of you will be sent back to the academy. He had no idea who he was dealing with if his sensei was trying to frighten him. Frowning, Naruto adjusted his new headband. He was determined not to let a few bells and a slothful scarecrow ruin his mission. The man went on, if you want, you can use shuriken and kunai. You won't succeed unless you come at me intending to kill. Naruto ran to the tree line, ignoring the final words. He would reveal who he was playing with to his foolish sensei. But he needed time for that. He didn't realize his new teammates had vanished as well until he had ducked behind a copse of fir. Kakashi appeared carefree as he stood in the clearing. As he slipped farther into the forest, the blonde complained. He was always told by Yoma sensei that a seal master with a plan could prevail in any situation. With a crazy smile, Naruto shrugged the knapsack strap off his shoulder and opened it. Kakashi. As he took an orange-bound book from a pocket in his flak jacket, Kakashi hummed to himself. There's no point in going back to where he left off. He was thinking about other things. Tenten Shiranui, the girl, was now standing on a low branch at the edge of the clearing, armed to the teeth, waiting for a chance to attack. Who knows? She might not find one. She had a wicked arm, according to academy reports. Even though she had little chance of surprising him, it would still be wise to avoid completely turning his back on her, even if it meant luring her in. The newest Byakugan prodigy is Neji Hyuga. Superb form, especially powerful with his lineage. Utterly combat-oriented rather than nuanced. Although it was unreasonable to anticipate that he would have diversified at this early stage of his career, it was difficult to hold prodigies to high standards. A harsh teacher was my personal experience. He had positioned solid objects between himself and any view of his target, just like his comrade, but he had ducked just far enough into the trees to think he was moving undetected. However, he was exposed by the hair oil. The scent was very subtle because it was a hair oil from a ninja village, but a trained nose could still detect it because it wouldn't sell well if it smelled like tree sap or deer urine. And Naruto comes next. The final Uzumaki, a recent mystery and a personal tragedy. Despite a quick investigation, Kakashi didn't even know where the boy lived anymore, despite the Hokage's assurance that he was well aware of his movements. His best guess was that it was some sort of covert training facility. He had personally dealt with a few tags that had been left over from his antics. Though not of commercial caliber, he was remarkably diverse and amazing for his age. Undoubtedly being instructed by a seal master, although the boy kept quiet about it. While eating at Ichiraku's ramen stand, he had heard him mention a Yoma sensei a couple of times, but ghost teacher could be any ninja trainer, aside from Guy. In any case, the boy had withdrawn far enough into the forest to be obscured by Kakashi's acute perception. A strange approach to a hit-and-run operation. I take it that Naruto recalled that the bells were on his belt? Naruto. As Naruto zipped between trees and leapt over the ground cover, his long, sleeved dark green shirt blended in with the foliage rather well. Under those branches, he could set up shop. There are lots of places to conceal tags. No, too vulnerable. He might find cover in that tree with the large trunk. No, it's too enclosed. That one might work, He must now determine which direction Kakashi will be coming from if he hopes to make this trap work. Which direction is the clearing from here, then? Naruto turned around slowly, paying close attention to everything that was going on around him. Alright, so where was this place? Tenten. The casual way her new sensei, if she managed to pull this off, turned the pages of his book made her pride scream for her to step in. Uncle Genma didn't raise any idiots, though. Tenten Shiranui refused to be taken advantage of. However, when the target seemed to be nothing but openings, how do you wait for one? She had lost sight of both of her new teammates by this point. Waiting for someone else to take the initiative is pointless. Tenten snapped her left arm forward, launching her first salvo before falling to the ground with a determined self-nod. Displace and swipe. As she had been instructed. She didn't teach you how to react when your opponent snatches a kunai out of the air and parries both of the other kunai with it without even shifting his feet. He had his book open. Hell, there was no way this would work. Alright, she will have to serve as the distraction and hope that either Naruto or Neji can take advantage of it. Tenten exploded out of cover and threw them into the air, grabbing a fistful of senbon from the hem of her jacket. Neji. What is the process for disassembling a Junin? Kakashi Hitaki was regarded as one of the best in the village, despite his lack of discipline and laziness based on what he had observed thus far. On the opposite side of the clearing, Tenten was forcing her to move. As anticipated, Hitaki-san was well prepared for such a blatant assault. A striking conservation of effort was observed when observing the Junin's reaction. He wouldn't use this diversion to breach the man's defenses if he was going to. Neji would not let himself fail, even though he didn't want to see his temporary teammate lose. He refused to let his cousin make him feel inferior. A sure way to lose was to jump at the first chance. Tenten was the most shocked when her senbon managed to get past her sensei's borrowed kunai and lodge itself in his chest. She was therefore taken by surprise when the wounded Junin exploded into a cloud of smoke, revealing a log pincushion. A hand sprang up from the floor beneath her and grabbed her ankle in that pregnant moment. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Earth Release. Decapitation technique for double suicide. Her smug opponent was squatting close by as she was suddenly dragged into the ground, only her head exposed. After taking a pair of chopsticks out of his pouch, Kakashi placed them in front of the wriggling genin and said, Now, Tenten-san. A ninja shouldn't act rashly. Here, I'm not without a heart. Wah. What are these for? For digging. Kakashi then disappeared in a whirl of foliage. Another blur whipped through the clearing in pursuit barely a second later. Uncertain of which intense emotion to experience first, Tenten simply gazed at the chopsticks. With no more sound than a robin, ninja sandals made contact with the branch. As he worked at the base of a tree with brush and ink, Kakashi gazed down on his unaware missing genin. To be honest, he was eager to find out if Naruto truly possessed the seal. Related family talent. However, without good field habits, a seal expert would not survive long enough to become a master. Post. Hurry, Naruto needed to have his exposed back drilled out of him. Kakashi noted the seal on the tree over his shoulder as he descended gently a few meters behind the boy. A seal that appeared suspiciously complete. Ace. Playback. Zai Sheng, a lifetime of ninja training triggered paranoid instincts. Just as the harmless looking genin exploded into smoke, Kakashi leapt away from it and cleared a pile of stones, exposing a happy blonde with a hand outstretched, too far away. After landing, Kakashi surveyed his surroundings once more. There was no disruption to Naruto's remarkably convincing illusion at the tree. This method was not a clone of a genin. The sounds, the shadows. Hold on, the brush is following the seal's pre-existing lines. Was it really that easy? Naruto simply recorded an illusion of himself and his surroundings because he lacks the experience to mimic the effects his clone should be having on the surroundings. The sound of horsehair against tree bark or a person's shadow over grass were not necessary for the seal or the user to comprehend. The seal replicated what he did. Kakashi was duped by it. When a charging Naruto approached, Kakashi caught the boy's haymaker by the wrist and shoulder and skillfully twisted his arm behind his back. To be honest, his taijutsu was a little disappointing in light of the recent trick. His final perspective pupil emerged from the brush a moment later with a quick two-step and a palm thrust to his chest. Or would have, had Kakashi not thrown his present opponent at the feet of the leaping prodigy after spinning him around. It's interesting to note that Neji handled the move well, pushing off to increase his altitude and keep moving forward while planting a foot on his incoming teammate's body. But being stomped into the ground didn't sit well with Naruto. Sophisticated but narrow-minded, Kakashi stepped back to put the target just out of range while he waited for the delayed palm thrust. In reaction, Neji surged forward, slamming into his knee and hip at the same time. Instead of retreating further, the Junin redirected his momentum before making contact by snapping his hooked hands down to prod the back of the Hyuga's wrists. A series of strikes ensued, none of which were more successful. Without taking the ground first or throwing his opponent off balance, Neji pushed forward in a seemingly desperate two-fingered lunge that culminated a string of elegant failures. Kakashi's hand was a blur as it dragged Neji's back hand into the elbow of the lead arm after closing around its wrist, which was perilously near the bells at his belt. Only the brief time it took for Kakashi to strike his solar plexus with a palm strike was enough for the wide-open genin to hold his ground. The boy in white lay gasping in the fallen leaves after skipping sideways across the ground. Naruto. He had his chance now. Kakashi was facing Neji's squatting form when Naruto tucked his feet under him and hurled himself at the man with his kunai. Naruto was flat on his back in a flurry of movement that he found difficult to follow, suggesting that the first time that didn't work wasn't an isolated incident. Demonic Illusion. Death Mirage Jutsu. Magen. Narakumi no Jutsu. The lights then went out. Naruto blinked up at the dark clouds above, groaning. With a start, he sat up and looked around, but Kakashi was completely gone. Although he was still on the ground, his teammate's breathing had lightened. Did he faint? At the end, he took a pretty severe blow there. To wake the other genin, Naruto hopped to his feet and hurried to him. Naruto knelt and shook the shoulder of the prone figure, his gaze still fixed on the tall trees surrounding him. Naruto cautiously rolled his teammate over when he received no response in return, but he jumped back when he saw the chest's wreckage. However, this was not Neji. As her eyes stayed eerily open, Mito Uzumaki's mouth gushed blood. The stain blooming across her white robes was so similar to her deep red hair that they couldn't be distinguished. Yoma. Sensei, wa. How? The boy's face was made to curve with tears as he realized what his eyes were telling him. He was too busy pressing his palms to his eyes to notice the clouds above changing from a dark gray to a red that was deeper and more menacing than the red that comprised the nightmare he was facing. As he knelt over his most valuable person's body, toxic power surged through him. With a satisfying crack, Neji rolled his neck and pushed against the ground. It would be necessary to follow Kakashi since he had left the clearing. He was unable to resist rubbing the middle of his chest as he slowly rose to his feet. If the Junin hadn't pulled his punch, that hit would have been his demise. Neji wasn't just any genin, but it was to be expected that a Junin would battle a genin. He was superior. He needed to improve. He swiftly verified that the bruises wouldn't significantly slow him down by extending his arms back. However, after the exercise was over, it would be wise to prepare a poultice for it. Neji sniffed mockingly at his temporary teammate, who was curled up on the ground, moaning softly. Not everyone was suited to be a ninja. Naruto returning to the academy was probably the better course of action. Now that he had his bearings again, Neji bounded into the trees to find their sensei. Rolling over, Naruto lost consciousness of everything but his thoughts. The only sound left in the empty glade was a pathetic moan, broken by a sob. Kakashi. Kakashi sighed as he followed the prodigy's fictitious trail back toward the first clearing, watching him fly. They were all talented and very motivated, but he was pretty sure they hadn't spoken to each other since the beginning of the exercise. Any respectable enemy ninja team would attempt to isolate and overwhelm them if they entered the field with this mindset. It was one thing to know what was wrong, but he wasn't exactly qualified to teach a group of children how to be open with one another. Perhaps someone else would be a better fit for them. However, he was undoubtedly drawn to Naruto's seal trick. Generally speaking, something like that wouldn't need to work twice on the same person, but it wasn't the type of thing that could. They might make a formidable team, especially when combined with the fighting prowess he had already witnessed from Neji and Tenten. There are 30 minutes remaining. Does he need to play with them further? They may become desperate and turn to one another if they are sufficiently irritated. It would at least be a beginning. His conscious mind detected an ominous vibe leaking through the forest, and a chill went down his spine. Before Kakashi turned and sped off toward the source, the hair on his neck had hardly stood on end. In a matter of seconds, he discovered Naruto on the ground, his clenched teeth choking off a cry, his back painfully arched. The genin was surrounded by a whirlpool of poisonous red energy. Was the Kyuubi there? Kakashi could sense the energy gradually intensifying from a few meters away, rising with each writhing moment of Naruto's agony. He had his eyes shut. Was he still using the genjutsu of Death Mirage? Even if the user was not aware, the chakra surrounding him ought to have destroyed a genjutsu of that level. Was the genjutsu being preserved by the Kyuubi? Pushing a surge of his own chakra through the boy, Kakashi touched the boy's shoulder through the flaming red chakra. Kai. His fingers turned red and numb as he snatched his hand back as soon as he sensed Naruto's chakra falter. Nevertheless, Naruto was relaxing without the genjutsu making him more anxious. Naruto lay limply on the ground, appearing to have spent too much time in the sun, as the alien energy seemed to grudgingly fade. Unaware that he had been holding his breath, Kakashi released it. The majority of the village shouldn't have been affected because Naruto's prisoner's chakra leak was still in its very early stages, but the Junin wasn't particularly excited about writing up the report on this one. He didn't realize how much more training the boy needed. After picking up Naruto's limp body and draping him over his shoulder, Kakashi leapt back into the trees, his adrenaline fading. Already irritated, Neji landed in the first clearing. He had been taken advantage of. The trail was faint but obvious until it abruptly vanished. He had been on a wild goose chase with Kakashi. Neji studied his new surroundings, schooling the faint frown he permitted onto his features. Tenten was carrying a pair of chopsticks as she climbed out of a hole in the ground. Was he interested in finding out? On the tree stump, the clock remained. It's 20 minutes to noon. Without looking up, Tenten brushed the dirt from her once nice pants and said, "So I take it you lost him?" There are 20 minutes left in the exercise. There isn't enough time to track him down, and he will likely return to this clearing before the time is up. We will set a trap. We? She asked, smiling mischievously as she glanced up at the prodigy. He really must have done a number on you if it's we all of a sudden. Without honoring her with a reply, and definitely not with a blush, Neji just kept looking around for possible advantages. Tenten sulked for a while. Okay, fine. What's your idea? Kakashi. Looking back, Kakashi would freely acknowledge his distraction. Now that the immediate threat seemed to have passed, he would undoubtedly carry out the test, but he was more concerned with the Hokage's response than he was with a group of genin determined to steal his bells. With 3 minutes remaining, he touched down beside the clock. The sound of a kunai pierced the air as he unloaded his unconscious passenger, causing his instincts to return to full force. Kakashi leapt back, dropping Naruto a bit more forcefully than he meant to. Before he reached the ground, an enraged Hyuga genius closed the final 2 steps, causing the 4th tree stump, which, to be honest, shouldn't have been there, to burst into smoke. The genin was still years away from fully profiting from such a mistake, even if caught off guard. Kakashi twisted just enough in the air to clamp an iron grip on Neji's wrist by flanking his forward hand. Kakashi brought his knee up to take the shot on his left thigh, which instantly went numb as the rear hand sprang forward. It might have been sufficient if there had been more time, but Neji was not afforded the luxury of an attrition-based battle. Kakashi heard a few more kunai coming from the tree line as he landed with his good leg. Another pincushion log was revealed by a lightning-fast substitution, but Byakugan was already blazing as Neji raced toward the Junin's new location. Kakashi emerged from behind the tree and waited for the genin to close after realizing that his new hiding spot was useless for his battle. At first, Neji seemed to be moving forward by pushing Kakashi in the direction of his weak left leg, but Kakashi was able to take both of his hands and lunged forward, slamming his Hite-Dotite into Neji's nose bridge. Neji lay stunned on the ground and saw another Kakashi emerge from the forest with a soiled Tenten. Ding! Kakashi began pulling Neji by his leg toward the stumps, but the genin soon awoke from his daze and stood up. Neji nevertheless stalked over to where his two teammates were lying on the ground, properly humbled. Tenten gently held her shoulder as she sat up. Neji gave the Junin a fixed gaze. It was intended for this test to be unwinnable. The most important question he had was not addressed by the fact that he had misinterpreted the win condition. With blood dripping from a cut on his nose, he made a very scary appearance. So how did he do it? Kakashi tilted his head sideways. Was Neji's head struck too forcefully by him? What was he discussing? Naruto? Something clicked in Kakashi's mind as he looked down at the blonde on the ground. He didn't appear to be unconscious, but his eyes were still closed. Kakashi looked down at his belt and saw what he had feared, feeling a feeling of humiliating dread. Just one bell. Naruto groaned painfully and pushed himself into a sitting position, assuming the jig was up. He raised one hand to eye level and dropped an object that jingled pleasingly on a short string. An insult to injury was Naruto's shit. Eating smile. Kakashi would never be able to move on from this.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.